welcome to Getting Your Money's Worth, the show that focuses on value. I'm Judith West, and our guest today is Randi Priluck, Director of Learning Assessment at Lubin School of Business, Pace University. Hi, Randi. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so before we go into it, I read about you in letters to the editor in response to an article that had been in the Times about learning assessment tools. What does Director of Learning Assessment do or teach? What is that?
I'm responsible for making sure that the students in the Lubin School of Business at Pace understand certain concepts and know certain things and have skills when they leave.
So that's what you assess. That's what the Director of Learning Assessment. So you are the one that signs off on how much they learn at Lubin School of Business?
No, the way it works...
That's like a big job to me.
I know.
Yeah.
The way it works is the faculty have gotten together and we've decided that there are certain skills that students should have when they graduate from a School of Business. In the undergraduate program, we have 5 sets of skills. My job is to make sure that we are covering those skills and then making sure that we improve each time we teach our courses so that the students have the skills.
So you validate what you have tools that validate what the students have learned at the end of the course. Or
usually we do something called outcomes assessment, so we do it at the end of the program.
So you do it at the end of the entire program, 4-year program?
Yeah.
Shouldn't you be doing it earlier to see if you made a mistake you could readjust?
Well, we are readjusting. Our assumption is that when we test the learning outcomes, that somewhere in the body of the program, that's where something might have gone wrong. So then we go back to the beginning of the program and we make sure that we do the intervention.
So, however, whatever the time is, you measure what if your goals for the program have been satisfied in the students.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Now you mentioned sets of skills. Without spending a lot of time, I want to get to the heart of the matter. Just give me a notion of what sets of skills you're measuring. You've mentioned 5, for example.
Communication, oral and written.
Okay, so that anybody needs that.
Yes, I mean certainly business people need it.
Yeah. Okay, so all right, and then
critical thinking and decision making.
Again, something that anybody would want. Okay, I think they're pretty broad-based general concepts. It's not exactly some finite accounting principle or some, I suppose, planning, business strategy, something.
One of our goals is quantitative applications. They have to be able to take numbers and apply them to appropriate business situations.
To make judgments about whether the business is successful or if it's going in a successful manner, reading a profit loss statement. Is that the kind of thing you? Yeah.
Those may be included, and in our accounting assessment, they definitely are.
Okay.
But generally speaking, they're more broad than even that.
You responded in a letter to the editor to a New York Times article that had a headline, "To really learn," and I'm quoting directly from the article, "To really learn, quit studying and take a test." And this article contends that they have measured a body of students who, when they learn a reading passage or they learn some set of facts, they take a test after it. And their research has shown that students who do that retain, I think they use something like 50% more of what they've just learned or recently learned, as opposed to other typical methods of assessment. Now, will you tell us what the other most typical methods of assessment are if it's not testing? Why are you laughing?
Yes, I'm laughing because the test that they did was a retrieval test directly for the information.
Right.
And for that purpose, it works.
A retrieval test means some kind of immediate recall. Is that what it means?
But that's not what you want students to come out of college necessarily only knowing.
Tell us how else you can measure this.
Okay, well, there are a whole host of methods for assessment.
Yeah.
Okay. The method that we use in the Lubin School of Business is we look at the course materials that the students have produced as part of their regular work. So we look at our courses and we ask the professors to give us the materials that the students produced, and then we evaluate those materials based on a set of rubrics.
Like an essay or what?
Essays would fall under that category. Right. We do a lot of case analysis in business school.
Okay, right. So a business case analysis. You've got this problem that the market share is declining, and you have a big overhead, and how are you going to maintain? I mean, that's sort of that kind of maybe typical small business or big business problem we have in today's world.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
So those are the kinds of materials we collect regularly,
So
and
what
then we
is that
evaluate them.
called? Is that something called, I mean, there were several, in reading about, I'm not an expert on testing, so you'll help me here. In reading up and getting myself ready to have this show, I read about something called concept mapping.
That's in the article.
Yeah, that the article. Okay, then I read. So, but tell me something. What are these other methods that folks talked about? If it's what does that mean when you say you look at materials, at passages from the student's own work?
We call this a course-embedded method of assessment, as opposed to, for instance, a standardized test.
So is this something like taking the facts that you've learned, or the concept that you learned, and connecting them together, connecting the dots to produce an example of how the facts connect to each other?
Presumably, if you've done the case analysis and you've done a good job, you would have done that. You would have taken the concepts and connected the facts, and then we can see whether we think your critical thinking skills are strong or weak based on that.
Okay. Is this a methodology that could be used in lower levels, or is this just appropriate to the college level?
I think it could be used at all levels, and I would encourage it to be used at the public school level.
You go so far as to say in your letter to the editor that, as direct rebuttal, studying, not test taking, is the key to learning. And you further assert that, in fact, test taking can hinder education.
Well, certainly it can, and it seems like the standardized tests do hinder education.
In what way?
Well, first of all, students become very focused on just the material in those tests, as do teachers, and then they teach to the test, excluding all the other possible material that students might learn that might be more interesting to them
or
personally.
More useful.
And perhaps more useful. Just because you can answer questions on a standardized test doesn't mean you actually know how to think.
Is the reverse true? I hear parents say, oh, my kids have good grades, they're smart, but they do poorly on standardized tests. Is that a reality also? Can a student be really bright and do poorly on a standardized test?
Absolutely. Standardized tests are a cheap way of assessing. If you really want to assess, then you treat professors and teachers as professionals, and you work with other methods. You do.
Well, give me an example. Can we just go down to the lower levels? Mm-hmm. Let's just go K through 6, kindergarten through 6. Okay. You know, there's a budget. Classes are full. Maybe a teacher has 28 kids, could be even 30 kids. A range of learning ability, a range of learning style. How would you apply a broader-based assessment to that classroom other than a test?
Okay, well, first you have to treat the teacher as a professional. Once you do that, then a whole host of techniques are available. One would be curriculum review. You sit down with the teacher and you talk about what he or she is going to be covering in class.
On an individual basis?
Absolutely. You know what the curriculum is. You pair teachers up with each other to discuss the techniques and the things that work and the things that don't. You can also evaluate them by asking them to do self-reports of what's going on in the classroom.
So this is all coming from the teacher?
A lot of it would be through the teacher.
Okay. You know, I just want to ask you, Randi, on a go-forward basis, let's just jump to this conundrum that we have in this country now, which is about productivity and evaluation and teacher performance and more money than the defense budget in education, and most and very unacceptable results in many, many instances. If you didn't use some kind of a standardized test, how could you possibly measure productivity for both taxpayer dollars and for the own students' benefit on a national level?
I'm not sure we should be doing that with a standardized test. I think it's perfectly okay to pull course materials and look at them. I think it's important for parents to be satisfied with the education that the students are getting. I have a child who's in a pre-K program, and I regularly meet with the teacher to talk about his performance and his success. I get surveyed at the end of the year from the Board of Education about my satisfaction. They could survey me on more things. I know what my child is learning. She sends me a weekly newsletter indicating.
I think it's also fair to say that you are not a typical parent, Randi, and we do have big pockets all over this country where there are parents that are working both parents are working, and they're working 10, 12 hours a day just to put food on the table.
Right.
And perhaps they mean well, but simply don't have the ability or the time, or in some cases the willingness to invest what you are. And we have teachers that are also under the same kind of time constraints or lack of willingness to invest that kind of time.
Right, and my child shouldn't be compared to every other child, because that wouldn't be fair.
Yeah. But getting back to how do we handle this on a countrywide basis, or even a statewide basis? While what you say sounds very attractive, I mean, I don't think anybody really wants to say you like it best when all kids do is recite facts. I mean, we've seen the benefit of that in our own graduates at this point. But I think that what is not figured out is how to aptly substitute something that would be a litmus test for learning.
Right. Well, your assumption is that the standardized testing is working. It's not. It's just one measure of one point in time when a child does X, Y, or Z. It doesn't mean they're smart. It doesn't mean that they're educated. We need to have a whole encompassing system where it's not just based on rewards and punishments, that it's in fact based on a person's true love of learning, and to tap into that. And the teacher has to be the person to do it. If the parent is not available, then the teacher can do it, but they have to have the freedom to do that. You can't find out a person's passions if you are just teaching to a test. It doesn't work.
So in the really the only short time that we have left, I think what we're working in this country, or what is, granted that it's not maybe it's not working as well as something else could, but nobody else has come up with something to substitute.
Well, I just gave you a whole bunch of possible ways to substitute and things that you have to do. It's more work, it costs more money, but we'd have to be willing to invest in that.
Right. And is this something that you think is practical for school districts around the country?
We do it at the college level.
Yeah. Well,
why can't they do it at the secondary school level?
That's what I'm asking you.
Colleges across the country are doing this, and we're doing a good job.
I can see how it might work, especially with someone who is as dedicated and well connected to it as you are. But I understand what the article said and what you're saying. I'm just looking for how what you're so well doing can be implemented on some kind of a national level. And I don't know. We're going to put your show up on the website and see if and see what
me.
nuggets.
I'll talk to
Okay, good. You're on. See what nuggets of learning we can do. You're on. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. You're watching Getting Your Money's Worth. I'm Judith West, host, and our guest was Randi Priluck, who is Director of Learning Assessment at Lubin School a business, Pace University, and who has said on air that if you want to learn about other methods of assessment rather than standardized testing, she'd be very happy to be contacted. Thanks for watching.